Hello, and you're very welcome to the JMAC Podcast. I'm John Fan. Of course, the podcast brought to you by Orgarech.com. Use promo code JMAC Podcast to get 15% off on the website. And today I'm joined by freelance broadcaster Killian Whelan to talk about Kildare's fortunes at the minute. General chit chat about the football action at the minute. And I suppose we down here in Cavan, it's probably like an untold story, but we can't get away from it. Johnny Johnston Saga that the podcast last week, so we'll have to touch on it as well, Killian. But I will start off with your good self. How are you?
I'm good, John. Yeah, good, and thanks for having me.
Oh, happy days, happy days. It's Cheltenham Day, so it's Christmas Day for a lot of people. So how are you feeling towards it?
I'd imagine, yeah. Well, look, I'd be a sports fan. I'd probably, I'm heading to Cheltenham myself as it works out at the end of the week, but it's more for the atmosphere and a bit of crack around it, and watching the action. But there'll be a few diehards with me now to be really. This is their Olympics as such, and you won't want to talk to them nearly for the next few days. But look, I'm looking forward to the trip and the crack. But as I said, I won't be. I won't be getting too worried about which horse wins or not, But still, look, you'd like to see Ireland do well and the Irish horses, and that's probably we'll be there being fairly patriotic, especially around Patrick's Day and everything.
Good stuff, good stuff. Of course, you're saying off air to me, you're obviously a secondary school teacher as well. I suppose how's school going for you? How's life going for you work wise?
Yeah, well, I'm 20 years now in a school called the Patrician Secondary School in Newbridge, which would be a hotbed of sporting action within this town that has given an awful lot of GAA players their opportunity, I suppose, to showcase themselves at Leinster schools level, and we unfortunately have never stepped out into All Ireland level too often in our time, and especially in the last number of years. But like with Moorfield and Sarsfield being the two strong clubs in Newbridge, and having gone on to contested Leinster level and have obviously provided a large number of players to the county teams here at minor, under 20 and senior. We're always thereabouts, let's say, and we've been well able to hold our own in Leinster A level over the years, John, across all the grades. But just unfortunately, we've never, let's say, got to feel the cup silverware, of serious silverware anyway at Leinster level. But maybe as said, everything is cyclical, and maybe the time will come again, because I know Moorfield and Sarsfields are probably in a stage at the moment where they're just going through a little bit of change, and but there's apparently crops of players coming down the line again, so that'll also have a benefit to the school, I would imagine, over the coming years. So lots to look forward to. But Newbridge, really a hotbed of sport, and the school would reflect that too.
Absolutely, Killian. Absolutely, good stuff. Happy days. And I suppose before we can touch on to Kildare's fortunes at the minute, and I suppose a general chit chat about the football action in the last couple of weeks, obviously the Alliance Football League, we suppose news broke with the Seanie Johnston podcast last week. He was on the BBC Sounds with Thomas Ibbuck and Oisin McConville, and obviously the transfer that took place. Jesus, 11 years ago at this stage, Killian, really.
And we're still talking about it.
We're still talking about it. We're still going on about, still yapping on about it. But I suppose obviously the news broke, and Seanie felt it was the right time to put across his side of the story. And I suppose coming away from it, people thought it was a very open, honest chat with Oisin and Thomas. I suppose, Killian, what was maybe your thoughts maybe on the podcast before you maybe get into the nitty-gritty?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose Seanie was given the opportunity, and it's a great credit, I better say it here, and I know it's an opposing podcast in ways, but Thomas does great work there, and Oisin is just one of those voices that you want to hear from, and you take on board an awful lot of what he says. But great opportunity, as I said, to hear from Seanie. And look, once he sat down, I'm sure he knew he was going to be asked, and because it's one of the great GAA stories, I think, of the time, and it'll be something that'll still be talked about in 40 and 50 years time. There's no question about that. So he is a man that obviously garners an awful lot of attention within Cavan, and I do think I'm hoping anyway that Seanie has been welcomed back into the Cavan fold in that sense. I don't think it's probably held too much against him anymore. Unfortunately, I think for him, I think when his name is mentioned when it comes to Kildare, there would be a lot of negativity around it. And I don't think I'd say you'd have to say at the end of the day, John, 95% of that has nothing to do with Seanie Johnston, but unfortunately he was the man that was involved, so that negativity probably ends up on his doorstep. But there's a lot of other people that needs to take some kind of flack for what went on around that time.
Yeah, I suppose kind of coming away from the interview, Killian, obviously everyone probably expected to be honest and open the way it was. What was your maybe thoughts on it? Because obviously it went on for what, an hour, 20 minutes, and I suppose there was a lot really put on the table, and the side effects of the transfer, everything going with it, and obviously you were in the ticket trust of it at the very time of it. I suppose what did you maybe make of the outline of the interview?
Yeah, well, like as I said, it was an opportunity for Seanie to give his version of events and, probably put to bed some of the stories that would have went around it. I know people are probably saying, well, look, it's 11 years later, but it still would have been, John, at a point when it's still very fresh for a lot of people because it probably, it was a scandal at the time as such, the whole scenario around it and how then it had to be worked out and the fact he had to play in a hurling match for ultimately the transfer to go through and all that, it just drew a lot of it. So to hear Seanie's point of view and subsequently as well, I think people forget, and this is the age now that we're in, that, John, that, there's very little thought now with people on social media that they put into the consequences that have had on people that they're talking about. 11 years ago, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have Skype and TikTok and whatever, but we did have Twitter, and that was maybe the first real example of where there was a little bit of the keyboard warrior starting to kick off. Forums would have been a big thing at the time as well, if you remember, and there definitely would have been a lot of stuff said on forums now that I think, looking back, I'd say a number of people are embarrassed by, what was said and heard, so, look, fair play to Seanie for going on and doing the podcast and for giving his side of events. Again, it just goes to show you the toll on his family and the fact that his mother and father weren't even in the country when he played for Kildare against Cavan. But it just was typical, wasn't it? The gods would have a say that after the whole thing happened, he'd end up having to go up to Kingspan Breffni to play Cavan, in an All-Ireland qualifier. It just, someone's going to make a movie about this, I would imagine, John. But Hollywood couldn't even script it,
100%, Killian. There's so much that went into it, and so many kind of patterns. And obviously, the word at the time, of course, Val Andrews was the man who, I suppose, did decide Seanie's destiny. Obviously Val did drop 4 to 5 players at that very time, and obviously Seanie was one of them. And obviously Seanie, chose Kildare. Kildare kind of came knocking. But I suppose kind of coming away from the interview, was there any kind of any moments in the interview that I wouldn't say took your breath away, but whoa, that actually happened, or that has happened in Seanie's life?
Well, look, the fact, as you said, when you're hearing his personal side of things and that you hear the impact it had on his family, well, that then straight away to me, is and look, it's what Thomas, I have to say, he's a top class interviewer. It's what he was very good at being able to tease out, and that's what makes that podcast essential listening. I would feel it's one podcast I go to now during the weeks to be able to catch up on GA material, and it's just a different insight. So that entirely, but it brought back memories for me, because I was there at the breaking of the story, and word was coming through in Kildare, and I remember at the time, John, I worked for the local radio station here in Kildare at the time, and it was a big story, and you couldn't be behind the door with asking the question, though. That was the thing, because I think I was lucky in that I was afforded an opportunity every Thursday evening to have a conversation with Kieran McGeeney. And McGeeney, a straight talker as you come, would we expect the same from you. He'd give you respect, he'd expect it back. And, he facilitated me on a Thursday evening, because we used to do a preview program on a Friday. I was trying to sell him the idea that, look, the Kildare people want to hear from you. We have this preview program on a Friday evening. We want to hear your talk. He didn't want to do it. When he came to Kildare first, he took a serious amount of convincing to do that interview on a Thursday evening. But he did. The thing was, I had to be at training on a Thursday night in Hawkfield. And if I wasn't there, he didn't care about it. He wasn't going ringing me to see where the hell I was. But if I was there, he knew he had to do the interview with me. And I'll always remember that evening. And when I think back about it now, it was unusual in a way that Geezer would answer the question, because it was starting to cause, probably there was murmurings going on, and he didn't cut me off. He answered it straight out. I think if I remember the question rightly, and you're talking about, John, maybe about 10, 10:15 on a Thursday night in not one of the greatest places in Ireland. Hawkfield can be a fairly wintry spot at times.
Yeah.
And you're asking this lad the question, and Geezer came straight out, and I said to him something essentially along the lines of, Seanie Johnston walked in the gates here of Hawkfield, would you have him, would you take him? And he said, absolutely. You'd be stupid, he said, to turn down someone like Seanie Johnston. That interview went out the following evening, and Martin Breheny, who was a contributor to the programme with us at the time, writing with Independent, obviously picked up on it, and it just snowballed from there. Took off to such an extent like that McGeaney turned around and basically told that I was at fault for bringing all this traction on him, and he actually banned me from training in Hawkfield for a week.
Oh God! Okay.
And that was the other side of it that probably people don't know. It was funny. It probably was funny at the time. Kieran has his own way of doing things, and he just felt, nah, you're the reason why this story got out. And I was going, well, this story would have got out at some point, But that's what subsequently happened.
And do you know, when you asked that kind of question, like, would you accept Seanie? Did you hear murmurs about the transfer taking place, and then you worded the question so as you probably knew an answer to the question, like you knew what was coming down the tracks, essentially?
Yeah, well, the word was out. In some cases, I was getting, like the thing was, you'd have to say, John, over the years, I was very lucky, I suppose, in my position as the sports editor, that I was, open, like, let's say, for example, I was open to information of things that was going on within the camp that a number of others wouldn't obviously have been. McGeaney put a lot of trust in you that he would, not saying he would be telling you stuff directly, but he trusted what you were doing, and he knew you had a job to do. He didn't overly like it in the sense that stuff might end up in the media and things like that, but I think he knew that I was only trying to do a job as well, and that's why he trusted me with that interview. But he probably was a bit naive to think that interview wouldn't be heard, if you understand me. That maybe, like Kieran, he wasn't probably overly long in the job in some cases. Like, he still probably, was 3 years in it. He should have been, but he probably didn't think it was going to grow the legs that it did, and probably didn't expect the reaction that it got to some extent. And that was probably then a factor that he probably, he won't mind me saying this, I hope, anyway, if he gets he probably threw his ties out of pram a little bit, and I was the one that was caught in the crossfire. And as I said, I went to training the following Thursday night. He didn't give me an interview.
I'm not surprised. I'm definitely not surprised. I suppose, like, in the middle of it all, Killian, obviously I was listening to your kind of reports on it and the interviews you'd kind of done with Seanie, as obviously being a proud Kildare man. Like, you yourself, obviously, it sounded like you did welcome Seanie into the county.
Yeah, well, I clarify there one thing, John. I'm ensconced in this county for a long time, but I'm a proud leashman. With Kildare connections, all right, we call it that way. But that's just so the Kildare lads don't come after me now being classified as that. But look, Kildare football over the years, I've had family connections with Kildare, John, over the years. I would have had a cousin of mine who would have been very prominent at national level, that would have been the chairman of the board and stuff like that. And, I would have obviously followed Kildare football, even though you were across in the neighbouring county, because of your family connections. And I would have been at, let's say, Leinster finals when they played, and, would have been there in 98, and obviously was involved in local radio and across the county from mid-90s all the way. So I would have seen the build-up to the Leinster finals of 97, the Saga with Meath, the 98 All-Ireland final, obviously, the celebration. I know obviously there were commemorations and such when they coming back after losing that All-Ireland final, but would have been involved around the kind of the coverage of that. And then, the arrival of McGeaney in the late noughties then, and the impact that had, and it drove Kildare's profile through the roof again, and like he was tapping in. He knew what was ahead. He'd been approached by a fairly forward-thinking chairman in Sil Mearns at the time, which was an unusual one. McGeaney had only given up playing, no managerial experience, but Mearns went after him and convinced him to come to Kildare, that the players were there. And, like, the players responded. 2010, a phenomenal year, but just, we're on a bit of a run that year. I firmly am of the belief, though, if Kildare got to that All-Ireland final, I think they would have taken Cork. I do think they would have been better prepared than Down probably were for the All-Ireland final. I think Down may have played their All-Ireland final that year a little bit in the semi-final.
Yeah.
I just think Kildare might have handled the All-Ireland final that bit better. But look, it is what it is now, and you can't cry over. But like McGeaney, there's no question about it. The stock that was raised that time, like you were covering Kildare. I like we went on trips to New York, Boston, with these guys, fundraisers, everything like that. And then being involved in the All-Ireland final runs and getting to qualifiers. Unlucky in 2011, a goal that should have been allowed. Tomas O'Connor judge had been in the square when they came back off the post against Donegal. Carl Lacey then with a point that's, he'll never kick again. Like the scenario with the scenario like with Kildare it was huge to be around, John. Like, and yet they never won an All-Ireland title in that time, but it was just phenomenal. And then you throw Seanie Johnston into the mix then as well. It was just like a crazy
carnage.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I suppose, like even like throughout the transfer, Killian, like were you kind of thinking to yourself? I know Seanie has come out saying that like, maybe he was a bit headstrong at the times and he was kind of pushing it through. Like you yourself, were you kind of thinking to yourself, right? Is this going to stop anywhere? And especially when the hurling kind of took place, were you kind of like, right, has he gone too far, or were you just like, let's keep going with this and see what it can do for Kildare football?
Well, look, as Geezer rightly said, if someone like Sean Johnston walks in the gate at Hawkfield and says, I want to play for Kildare, you're going to take him. I think if he'd walked into any county in Ireland, Sean Johnston, at the end of the day, I still don't understand Val Andrews' decision at that point. I think Sean Johnston would have played for any of the 31 other counties that would be in the All-Ireland series. There is no question about it. He would have been taken in everywhere. So, McGeaney was obviously aware of this, was made aware of it, and obviously, scenarios were created that this could be facilitated. He had to have an address in Kildare, which he did. And even though people might find it odd that he was as far as I've 100% confirmed that he was living in the house in Straffan and driving to work in Cavan every day, which, as I said, people found unusual at the time, but all things were being done correctly. The one issue I would ultimately have is that whatever about the house in Straffan and that all, bills in his name and everything like that having to be created and stuff like that, that it was all to make that authentic, which seems to be 100%. There's no question about it. There was nothing wrong in that scenario.
Yeah.
The problem I would have is the fact that he had to join up then with Kildare Hurling Club to play in a couple of minutes of their hurling championship in Clane that day. There was cameras from the two TV networks that were covering the country at the time, standing on the bank at a Kildare hurling club match that would have been unheard of, that even some of the local media wouldn't even have been at, John. Never mind, having TV3 as it was at the time and RTE on the bank, making sure that Seanie Johnston was out there pucking the ball. And that qualified him then to play with Kildare. That's the one that stuck to me a bit, was that he
and a lot of people too, you and a lot of others, Killian,
that would be the thing. I like, as I said, him wanted to come and play football. He did nothing wrong. He wasn't in Cavan anymore. He wasn't wanted in Cavan. He moved address. He was living in Kildare, wanted to play with Kildare, but he had to then to be involved in that year's championship. He had to play a club championship. There was no football championship for a number of weeks, so he wasn't going to be able to get to play in the All-Ireland series if he didn't get to play in the hurling championship, because obviously there wouldn't be too many dual players or anything like that involved. That had started early in Kildare. He was put in as a Kildare hurler, and I'd say he barely talked to the boys in the dressing room. We probably tugged in when he played his 3 or 4 minutes cameo, and that was it. Job done. He had played a club championship in Kildare, and he was then able to turn out for Kildare. That still rankles with me, and I'm sure it does with a number of members within Kildare. But there was lads who were members of those clubs that were heavily involved in the Kildare setup at the time, and it was facilitated obviously to help their clubman in that. But again, it would be something I think that it won't go down. I'd imagine if a history of Kildare was being written, John, I don't think it'll get a page or a chapter in the book, I have to say.
Yeah. Oh, bonker stuff, Killian, bonker stuff. And I suppose kind of alluding to the point you were just saying, but the crest of wave the Kildare really wear on, and the fanfare around McGeaney, the team foreman, and I suppose like maybe Joe Brawley and Conor Rourke kind of saying it was just an unnecessary distraction from a Kildare team that were moving really, really well. Do you feel the transfer maybe took away from a Kildare team that were moving very, very well, Killian?
Yeah, and I think it took away some of the country's goodwill, John, if that makes sense. I think Kildare would have been around that time everyone's second team, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people around the country wouldn't have begrudged Kildare if they had got over the line. They were on the end of a couple of hard luck stories there, as you said, with 2010, 2011. So I think, people probably went, here now, this is a bit rich of you. Although I do think, John, people might have got over it if Sean, it had all gone legitimate and he'd played football and everything like that. The fact he had to play a hurling match, I think that's what rankled, and he wasn't a hurler. That probably really, it was a bending of the rule. The rule was there. He was entitled to play, once he was playing hurling or football. But I think that's what the little bit of ill will crept in then. And, I do think then that Kildare, I wouldn't blame Sean Johnston or anything like that, but maybe some of the morale, or maybe some of the pep behind him, in the sense that how well the few years had gone, I think it just eradicated that a little bit. And look, again, I come back to it. That's not Sean Johnston's fault, and it's not the fault of some of the people that put that transfer in place and organised for him to have a residence in Kildare or anything like that. I do think, though, going back to it again, the fact of how he had to get the transfer, having to play, or how he was able to play with Kildare, that he had to play of another code, that's the one that really, I think, stuck in people's throat, that it wasn't really what we're about in the GAA, and it probably is the one that sticks. I don't blame Sean Johnston one bit, and there's probably some of the people, as I said, involved in the transfer, I don't blame either. It's just that bit I would have issues with.
So the last thing on it, Killian, suppose the day in Cavan, Breffni Park, the sun was splitting the stones. You had 15,000 in Breffni Park for the game itself. The media attention around it, just a very weird sort of day, Killian, to say the least.
It was, and I have to say, John, I've been lucky to go to Kingspan Breffni Park on a few occasions, and you won't like me saying this, but I've been on the end of where, teams I was kind of covering came out with victories in it, and I love going to Kingspan Breffni Park. I think it's one of the most iconic venues in the country, and I'm not saying that now because you're a Cavan man. I just, the atmosphere in it, if you get a crowd in, it can be phenomenal in itself. And that day, I'll never forget it. I wasn't on commentary duty, as it turned out, that day. One of the other guys that works with me was, and I was just observing. I was around the back of the stand, and I went out onto the terraces and everything like that, and the atmosphere was phenomenal. And I remember Sean, he came on, and there was some booze, but I would imagine it wasn't as, how would I put it, John? I don't think it was probably as bad as maybe some people thought it was going to be. And maybe, there was a little level of respect in some way. I'm not saying every Cavan person respected Sean Johnston for what he did, but I think there might have been some level of, let's be bigger people here. And I think that, in fairness to the majority of the Cavan support, I think that was fair enough. I'm sure it rankled with them that he came on and he scored a couple of points then as well, but look, I do think, I would say Cavan probably came out of that, with their heads held high, Cavan supporters. I don't think they made it, look, the media were trying to build it up and that it was going to be this, that, or the other, and he mightn't even get out onto the pitch nearly in some cases, but I think Sean held his, in fairness to him, to deal with all that stuff, and the fact that he knew his mother and father weren't in the country and everything, and I'm sure it was a tough week, to go out and hold, to be able to play the game, John, was a big thing. But I think, Cavan probably can hold their heads held high that they didn't make it raucous and unnecessary, let's say.
Yeah. I suppose kind of overall, Killian, the interview last week, he'd done a bit off the ball the following morning. I suppose, to surmise it all, Killian, what would be your general summary of the whole transfer?
Look, it's definitely a scandal of its time. Look, I go back to John. There would have been nothing wrong with that transfer. And I think while it would have rankled a little bit with people to some extent, because we would be of the GAA that you play with, or where you're from and so forth. But look, Sean Johnston wasn't afforded that opportunity, and he went looking to play football. He was still at the peak of his powers, and I would have no issue with the way the transfer, the residence, him commuting up and down while it was taking enough, I'm sure, a lot out of him. He was prepared to be able to show it, and he obviously, his nose was out of joint, which was probably understandable with how he had been treated by Val Andrews and so forth. My ultimate issue would be is the way that for him to be able to get out onto the field with Kildare, how it had to be done. That would be it. What also would rankle is ultimately, again, was that his family were affected by it. But, you know, look, that's what the GAA, John, unfortunately, you're representing the area you're from, the parish, and people feel they can have a bit of you. And, you know, unfortunately for the Johnston family, that's essentially what happened. Some people felt they could have a bit of them. And, you know, it's sad to think that his parents had to leave the country because of what was going on around it. It'll still be one of the great stories, though, John.
Yeah.
And as I said to you, it'll still be talked about in years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Darren Farrell was saying around kitchen tables and bar stools. I think he was the RT report that day was, and still no doubt it's still being talked about after last week. I suppose, Killian, we could kind of touch on to Kildare's fortunes at the minute. In Division 2, obviously it's been a tough last couple of weeks for the Kildare lads, and obviously I suppose from an outsider looking in, the right men are definitely in place to lead the Kildare project forward, but the results are not happening on the pitch, Mr. Whelan.
No, they're definitely not, John. And you know, the kick that they got from Ennis, which was a fantastic result. Like, I would have to give Kildare credit against Dublin. You know, they went and played well in Croke Park and probably should have won that match. So people had turned around and say, well, look, Dublin had so many wides and they probably should have won it. That's fair enough. But I was, you know, happy enough with how Kildare performed. And I said, right, okay, these lads, you know, didn't stand back and admire Dublin, had a go, and, you know, that might be considered for promotion. To then subsequently, like, you know, it falls asunder over a few games. You bounce with Clare, and you go down to Ennis. You're 5 points down heading into the last couple of minutes of injury time, or 4 points down, and you bounce 5 on the trot, and you come out with a point win in what has been a bogey team for Kildare in recent years, John. Clare haven't been easy opposition at all for some counties, but definitely not Kildare. And I'm thinking back to when they beat them in the Division 3 league final there a few years ago. But, you know, like, I would have thought, yeah, no, a win on the road, this could be do well. But their form at home has been absolutely shocking. Yeah. And like the last day against Derry, it just looked like the guys had been up the Curragh for a run. And we know it here. There's a famous hill that was in the film there, Braveheart. It's called Braveheart Hill. And by God, Miko used to bring the lads up and down that a few times during the 97, 98 time. And you felt like Glenn Ryan was after doing that morning with the boys and making them sprint up it. And they were dead on their feet, and there was no life and no leadership and no nothing. That we're now in a situation that Kildare find themselves away to Limerick and at home to Meath. And you have a Limerick team without a manager that has, you know, probably has moved on from the job because the players are not happy. That means then that Kildare are going down into the lines then, I think, this weekend with a Limerick team that are going to bounce. You can't be guaranteed you'll get the points in Limerick. And they're then coming up to Newbridge hoping that they'll have to beat one of their oldest foes of all time. And I'd imagine it'll be a fairly tough atmosphere. Yeah. But, like, you shouldn't have to be leaving it all in Newbridge on the last day, hoping then head-to-head and all that, John, works out that they might get over Clare on the head-to-head rule. But, I look, it's not going to be easy. They have to aim for 4 points, but none of those points are going to be easier. No way.
Yeah, and I don't know, I was watching the games from afar, and obviously on League Sunday and some of the highlights and clips, and we're just seeing a very lethargical Kildare team, and obviously Cork beaten by so much at home, and like that's unheard of. Like it's a Lions Den, Newbridge, it always was for Kildare over the years, and obviously we obviously remember that Mayo game a couple of years ago, a couple of summers ago. So I suppose, Killian, what the big question is probably an obvious question, but what is going wrong?
To me, I think, you know, like Glenn has been hit by a number of you know, guys not available. I was just thinking, I was talking to a couple of guys here locally, John, in the last few weeks. There was a picture put up of 4 Kildare footballers out in Australia, I think it was, and they were playing for one of the clubs out there, playing in a sevens tournament. And all 4 of those guys would seriously be considered part of the Kildare senior panel at the moment. A number of them would have been involved in the Kildare under-20 All-Ireland victory a few years ago. So to see the 4 guys, now they're entitled to go on their travels and everything like that, John, and it mightn't have been Glenn Ryan's fault or anybody's fault for that matter that those guys are gone. They're 21, 22, they're finishing up college. If they probably don't go travelling now, it's never going to happen for them. So, look, you can't blame them. But he's lost, let's say, a number of talented individuals, I would think. And also there's a loss of form in 1 or 2 other individuals. He's picked up a couple of injuries. And I also would have to say, John, I think the team, despite a number of key individuals being there a long time, and I'm talking about the Mark Donlans, the Mick O'Grady's, the Owen Doyles, I'm thinking maybe even Daniel Flynn is around the block now a long time as well, the Ben McCormicks. some of those guys just aren't at, I would say, a level that they probably have been at in recent year. And whether Glenryan has to take a fall for some of the tactics, I would say yes. But I do think that there is a loss of form among some players that I don't think can be wholly blamed on management either. So where's the fault? Like, I think it's a bit of both, John. I do think maybe the management have miscalculated the importance of the running and certain games in the league in order to be sure that they were part of the Sam Maguire series. I think that's beyond them now. And I think, what Kildare should be doing is let's secure our place in Division 2 and have a crack at the Tailteann Cup and try and win the thing, because I think they'd be one of the most feared teams in it then if they were. Because and listen, All Irelands don't come around too easily in Kildare, John. So I don't think it'd be one to be turning their nose up at. And I think, if I was Glenryan, if I won the Tailteann Cup, I would take it and it'd be out the gap, because I do think the tenure, the fan base, everything like that, they're starting to turn a little bit here, John. To me, when you have Glenryan, Anthony Rainbow, Dermot Earley, John Doyle, and Brian Lacey, all of being kingpins of their positions on that Kildare team over the years, and the fans are turning on them, you'd worry about their legacy for the remainder of their time, as Kildare footballers. So, I don't know. I just think it could be the beginning of the end of this Kildare management, John. And you just wonder if, though, they, let's say, stayed in Division 2 and won the Tailteann Cup, maybe they might get a stay of execution. But I'm not sure the management team is going to stay around. That would be my only thought as well,
Seems, because obviously I think it was John Fogarty of the Irish Examiner tweeted last Friday that, breaking GAA management news, and I for one definitely thought it was going to be Kildare, and then it turned out to be obviously Ray Dempsey with Limerick. It's mad to think it's gone so south, Killian.
Yeah, no, it is, and especially with, as I said, with men that would have the experience of all five of those that are involved. But look, maybe there'll be a bounce, John. I do know that obviously, like every other county, they're doing a hard enough program at the minute, and that trying to factor with the league and everything like that is probably, it's a tough slog. And also, of course, what's the carrot at the end, John? You like, this has been one issue I would have had with this year. You don't know what series you're going to be playing in. And, like, if lads know they're putting in the hard yards because they're going to be challenging for the Sam Maguire, or they're in the series anyway, maybe the focus is a bit different. But one result here, two results, whatever, and then they kind of dip and everyone's going, oh, here, we're not going to be playing for the Sam Maguire this year. We're only going to be in the Tailteann Cup. Maybe the foot is off the gas. You don't know. Like, you just don't know what way the malaise can hit a squad. And, if there's questioning then of the manager or the way they're doing things, like, then that all of a sudden, all that negativity builds up around it. And, you could go to Limerick and Kildare get a great result on Sunday, and they come and beat Meath, and that could be a great shot in the arm then for the rest of the summer, John. But like, if they roll on a couple of losses and they're relegated on the back of just one victory in the whole league, down to Division 3, as we've talked about on air already, Division 3 can be a tough spot to get out of.
Yeah, God, you just wouldn't like to foresee that for Kildare. And I suppose, obviously, with the lads that are involved there with Kildare football at the minute, and obviously, Paul Galvin did kind of have to step away and make no doubt about it, the right men are in place. Do you feel maybe, is it just going down to maybe lads maybe potentially not buying into the Kildare project, like, or is maybe like it can't be down to the management team not listening to the lads that's there at the minute? So it's I suppose it's mystifying, and I suppose to this point thing as well, Killian, maybe from a Leinster end of things, obviously with Meath being very Jekyll and Hyde, with Kildare being very Jekyll and Hyde at the minute, like, Dublin could be looking at Leinster titles for the foreseeable really again.
Yeah, and you know what, John, the worry is that Dublin are not probably anywhere. I'd say they're only at about 60% of where they were 3 years ago, and like, they're still going to be able to win Leinster. Like, I would have felt that if any county was perfectly set up to take Dublin's mantle a little bit, at challenging a bit more at Leinster, it was Kildare. When you consider that, at minor and under 20 level over the last 7-8 years, the one county that has put Dublin to the sword on numerous occasions has been Kildare. And, that follow through has not happened. Now, I do have to say, it mystifies me why so many Kildare players have been lost from underage to senior level. Whether someone decides they're not making the cut, whether the lads decide, nah, I've done my bit and I'm happy to have won an All-Ireland Under-20 medal, and I'm not going to put in the hard yard that is needed. And as you know, not every Under-20 John comes out and makes a senior team, but you would, in Kildare's context, you would be expecting, and they probably need of that Under-20 team, they would have been expecting 4 to 5 to 6 maybe lads to come forward, nail down central positions and drive on this group. But that unfortunately hasn't happened. And you're probably looking at that Kildare Under-20 team, and you can see more lads that are gone than more lads that have gone in. You know, it's like it's a, I feel, a sad state of affairs. But it looks like Dublin, even at 2/3 of their overall potential, because I do think the talent base coming behind in Dublin is not as strong as it was, John. So if one Leinster County wants to step up there, I'd love to find out who the hell they are, because Kildare are doing their best to flitter it away. So, you know, you just feel there's some opportunity there for someone if they wanted to step up.
Loud, obviously, with the former Samuel Ray and Mickey Hart.
Yeah, Loud, look, they have potential. But again, I think, John, they're just maybe lacking on certain occasions. I'm not fond of the Mickey Hart ball that they play, I have to say. I think there's far more talented footballers in Loud than Mickey maybe is giving them credit for. This men behind the ball. I'm not degrading now. There is a need at certain time to have men behind the ball, and I would be all for floating tactic, whatever. But, you know, like, Loud football is better than what Mickey Hart is unfortunately producing at the minute, I have to say. That's just my honest opinion on that. I always think they're a county that some people might say they shoot above their status, but to me, Loud have always had talented footballers and have a credible history, so they should be given credit. There's no question about that. Are they able to make the leap this year? Well, let's see, maybe at championship level, see what happens. Yeah, no question. Would they be able to upset one of the big guns? Possibly someone in around 8, 9 and 10. I don't think they'd challenge anyone in the top 8, John. That's my perfect, they might live with them for a certain while. I don't think they're going to get over the line against some of the bigger counties. But, look, Loud potentially, could be. But, there's doors open there for a lot of Leinster counties. But unfortunately, for a county like my own, Laois, we're in Division 4. It's a long way back. You know, like, you're not going to be challenging the Wicklow's, the Wexfords, teams that would have in the noughties and maybe late 90s would have been up there challenging. It's going to be a long way back for some of those counties. So then you're talking about who's the ones at the nearest eventually that could challenge Dublin. You're talking about Kildare and Loud. Kildare, unfortunately, have slipped. Westmeath could make a bit of a run. So I think Westmeath and Loud now are above Kildare. That's the way I would look at it. And all the others are probably in a bit of a pack together. So who's going to win Leinster this year? Dublin. That's it.
in a roundabout way. And I suppose obviously we see the tweets and we see the analysis, and people probably having a pop at this Kildare team. And I know obviously Hugh McKenna probably was very, very strong with his words there a couple of weeks ago. And obviously I would say a lot of that's true, is what maybe I know Hugh could be very controversial. But do you feel maybe some of the slack maybe the Kildare team are getting is warranted, Killian?
Yeah. For having worked in the county for so long, John, both in teaching and within the media, Kildare fans turn very quickly. And I have to, like, Paddy O'Shea was criticised for calling the Kerry folk animals down there, but like that wouldn't go bereft in Kildare on occasion, because I do think people lose the plot. Kildare haven't won an All-Ireland since the 1920s at senior level. Like, what gives them the divine right to think that they would be challenging? I don't know, but they definitely have that kind of vibe or ego on occasion about it. But there's no question about it. Kildare have had many talented footballers and were very, very close in 98, 2000. Probably they got another run of it there, winning Leinster titles. There's no question they're the county, I would feel, that is perfectly set up with their population base, with the quality of footballer, with their underage success, that they should be doing better than they are at senior level. And there's no question about that. But by God, they have no divine given right to think that every morning they get up, they're going to win. And they're sadly, unfortunately, finding that out in Division 2, which I have to say is disappointing, John, because, at Division 1 last year, I think they were a little bit unlucky to be relegated. But it is what it is now. And unless something rectifies itself over the next week, I think to me, they'll be in Division 3 football next year.
Unfortunately, it is looking like, Killian. I suppose your thoughts on the current state of affairs. Obviously, we've another exciting weekend to look forward to this weekend in Division 1, 2, 3 and 4. So there's loads of games to look forward to. What's your general thoughts at the minute, and who's, I suppose, the front runners for you?
Yeah, well, look, John, keeping an eye on things has been a little bit difficult for me. I cover ladies football and camogie a lot in recent times with a lot of the streaming services, but you would obviously be keeping local interest with Kildare. But look, counties that are obviously standing out, the Mayos and the Galways, that have played some phenomenal ball this year. You've had some upsetting results. Kerry not probably flying at all cylinders at the moment, but sure, you mean to tell me that when it comes around to a big day and a warm championship Sunday in Croke Park in July, that the Kerrys won't be thereabouts again? Absolutely, they will be. I think it's Kerry's to lose this year again. I think, come championship, there'll be a different animal. I do think obviously they do need everything clicking for them, like any county. I don't think Dublin are going to be All-Ireland contenders. I think they'll win Leinster, but I do think there's other counties that are ahead of them with regards to the All-Ireland series. I think Galway will have learned an awful lot. I think Mayo have, I know a large number. I have a couple of colleagues here that I work with, Mayo people. They're looking obviously to keep down the buzz around, but McStay seems to have tapped into something there. They've a new lease of life. So look, they'll be there, but again, the championship, as you know, John, will throw up something. Ulster, Armagh, but like they can be fickle as well. So are you looking at Derry coming again? Could Tyrone could there be a kick in them? Could Cavan cause a surprise? Like you just don't know where any openings are. There's always, John, will be one story, and I'm looking forward to that in the summer. I think we could have a summer where we might get an upset, and there could be just someone comes from a shot in the dark a little bit, and might be something that would be completely unexpected. So could that be something like Louth end up in an All-Ireland semi-final or something? Who knows? But it could be an interesting championship. But at the moment, you're probably looking at the likes of Mayo, Galway, the Armagh or Derry scenario. Kerry, I think, will have a kick. I don't know whether Cork are going to have a say in the All-Ireland series this year for me just yet. They might next year, though. I think they're a team maybe that might be starting to come. And in Leinster, Louth, maybe Westmeath to get in there, Dublin, maybe Kildare will have a kick, but I can't see it.
Yeah, I suppose, Killian, I suppose the games that you maybe do get to see, or even the highlights on Twitter, or even the League Sunday on a Sunday, like, are you enjoying maybe, like, I suppose the standard at the minute, Killian, because obviously some of the games in Division 1 are, you nearly turn it off at half time the way some of the games are going. So I suppose you're enjoying maybe the standard of the game as well.
Yeah, but look, John, that's all the great thing about GAA and with Gaelic football in general. Like, Gaelic football has seen an awful lot of rule changes and everything like that in recent years. And I'd love to see that we could just leave it alone, leave hurling and football alone for a couple of years and just let them play out. Like, a lot of things are cyclical, as I probably word to repeat myself. But that, we seem to be in the GAA. Oh, we need to change that rule. We need to change this rule. We go to, right, bring it to Congress. You don't see it happen too often in other sports. Like, let the thing settle and play out. And okay, people are going, too many men behind the ball. Right. What we need to do is we stop the back pass. No one out. If you go beyond 45, can't pass it back. Maybe there would be some benefit. I don't know. There'd be a change. There'd be teams would come up with something to counteract that, John. There is no question about it. And, trying to get guys to stay in position, forget about that. That's something that was 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I love seeing the free-flowing movement, everything like that. We've seen some excellent scores in the championship. Lads giving out about Ethan Rafferty, he should be a goalkeeper. He's a goalkeeper. He's stay in the goal. Why should he stay in the goal?
Yeah.
Just because they came up with some new concept. Why aren't other counties doing it? And there are other counties doing it. Obviously, we've seen it happen in Monaghan. Before that has happened, Kerry have tried it a little bit as well. There's other counties have probably not gone as fluent with it, and it hasn't probably worked as well as it has for Armagh in some ways. But like, I just love innovation, difference, and if that gets you over the line and trying some kind of different tactic or different kind of, as you say, play or something like that, all for it, because it just means the game is growing and developing. All I just want people to do, and administrators to, leave the game alone.
Yeah.
Just let it play for a couple of years, and then maybe let's have a visit at it to see if something wasn't working out,
Don't fix what's not broken, Killian, is probably what
you did. Your question at the start, John, was about the quality. Yes, there has been, but that's because, again, if you have a defensive structure like maybe Louth or playing or something like that, and the county can't break it down, well, then who's at fault? Is it Louth for being good at what to do, or is it the county for not breaking it down? And I would have to say it's the county that can't break it down. If you have a quality of forwards and they're able to kick the ball over the bar, if you're able to kick long distance, 45 yards over the bar, you'll soon break down the Louth defensive system. The problem is, if you have an inter-county footballer that can't kick a ball over from 40, 45 yards out, John, there's a problem. So, it's the problem is you're coaching, not the guys that's putting up the defensive wall.
Yeah. Yeah, well said, Killian. Well said. Hopefully we can see a few good scraps this weekend. I suppose, Killian, what players are exciting you at the minute? Who would you be paying into Newbridge or Croke Park to see these days?
Well, look, I'll start on a local level. There's one guy here in Kildare, and again, probably a lot has talked about him. Jimmy Hyland is a phenomenal young player here in Kildare, and I think is going to represent the county at a high level, hoping injury and everything like that. He might be small, diminutive character, but by God, he's well able to step up and stand up for himself. So he will be one lad I think we're going to be seeing an awful lot more of, in the coming years. I would think as well, keep an eye out for, obviously, Sam Mulroy in Louth. I think a phenomenal talent. Would have seen Sam over the years. I would have done a bit of work up in Louth and Meath, and would have seen him over the years as well. I do think, Rian O'Neill, phenomenal player with Armagh. He's just one that obviously stands out for me. And sure, look, like you could talk about Galways and the Kerrys and various other guys, Young O'Donoghue and Mayo. Again, it's another good talent. Hessian is a good talent there as well, the cornerback with Mayo. So, a number of different lads that are standing out for me over the years, and young guys that are coming through that to me will should light us up. But, when you look at the likes of Kerry and the quality that they can produce with the likes of Sean O'Shea and the Clifford brothers, but David Clifford, John, has to be mentioned. Is he the greatest ever? Why would we be saying he's the greatest ever at 22, 23 years of age?
Liam Hayes would say nothing off the ball. He thinks it's very premature. Yeah.
It is premature. There's no question about it. I have to agree with him on that. Now, I know Liam is coming from an era that, I played with the greats. Yeah, he played with greats, and there was some greats, and there's no question about that. But would David Clifford get on that Kerry team of the, that went on the run with Miko? Absolutely, he would. Yeah. Who would you take off it? There's probably one or two that he would slip in ahead against. But would he line up with Mikey Sheehy? Yeah, he would. But is he the greatest yet? The chap is 23 years of age. I think he is, John. Give him his time. As he said, maybe talk about it when he's 31 or 32. I'm just glad he's playing now. I would have grown up on stories being a Laois person. Tom Curly Prendergast would have been a great player. Probably would have been talked about in other counties. We didn't get to see a whole lot of him probably on a national stage because Laois only won a National League title in '86. But Mark Connor, what a player he was for Offaly. And you look back at some of the old GAA gold programs that would be on, you'd see the scores that he got. Unfortunately, accident, injury, subsequently, the Matt ended up in a wheelchair because of an accident, and we never got to see him at his total prime. Imagine what he would have been like in his prime. So, an injury to David Clifford, and we might never see him in his prime. So, I just think people need to lay off a little bit, enjoy him now, and let's see how his career progresses. Because don't forget, there is talented footballers in other counties. He is, no question about it, at this moment in time, probably the greatest footballer in the country. But will he be one of the greats? Let's just let his career play out, and then we can make a judgment call on that.
Yeah, very much the same opinion as that. Dare I ask about Laois football?
Laois football, yeah, in a bit of change. Need to get out of Division 4. No offence to the counties that are in it. Laois are better than that. Are we any better than that subsequently then? I don't know. In a bit of a change. No offence to the guys that are lining up with the county at the moment. We're having to have a couple of guys hang on there to try and get some younger lads to come through. That'll be another change of the guard. There's a few guys there progressing all right. There's no question about it. But you still have, as you said, a number of. I'm thinking of one in particular. He's from my own parish at home, although he's the opposite end of the parish. In Kevin Timmins, and he still lining out with Laois and working the Oracle. I think that Kieran Lillis still putting on the jersey as well for Laois and doing it. Paul Kingston's been around a long time, still pulling on the jersey and doing it. But Laois are probably just under talent a Division 3 team at the moment. Can they get any better? I don't know is my answer, John, because I just think Laois talent at academy level, or whatever you want to call it, is a little bit bereft of lads who are probably in their 23, 24 age group now. There is a crew coming, I believe, at 14, 15, 16 years of age, but like you're talking about a few years before they emerge on the scene. So, look, I think Laois 2-4, I don't know how much better they are than that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll wait and see what fortunes to have lies ahead. Well, Killian, William, thanks a million for joining this week. And of course, the podcast brought to you by orgretch.com. Use the code JMAC podcast to get 15% off on their website. Killian, have a great week. Thanks very much.
Thanks indeed, John. It's a joy to be with you.
Cheers, Killian.
Did I lose you at the end there, John, or would you lose me, no?
I think so. It just hits the stop recording there.
Just check it there if you want.